The mansion was silent. Every polished floorboard, every golden handle, and every marble surface seemed to hold its breath. Alexander Moore, billionaire and master of the estate, lay in his bedroom, eyes half closed, pretending to sleep. He had long since grown accustomed to the hum of his household, the soft rustle of Maid's footsteps, and the occasional scurry of staff finishing late chores. Tonight, however, something drew him from the comfort of his bed. He shifted, careful not to disturb the sheets, and inched toward the slightly ajar kitchen door. There she was, Amara, his black maid, bending low, her small frame almost swallowed by the vastness of the kitchen. She moved with practiced stealth, slipping leftover portions into a worn, brown satchel. Her face, illuminated by the pale kitchen light, was focused, cautious, but beneath it, a vulnerability flickered. Alexander's breath caught, not at the sight of stolen food, but at the thought of why she moved so carefully, so deliberately, under his roof, in his home. Amara's eyes darted to the stove, then to the pantry, then back to the small bag. Every motion was deliberate, almost ritualistic. A tinge of fear lingered in her posture, but stronger was a resolve Alexander had never noticed before. He had seen maids work, seen children play, seen families in their struggles, but this quiet act spoke of something far deeper. Flashback. Years ago, Amara had stood in a dimly lit room, holding the hand of her dying husband. His whispered words had been about survival, about duty, and about keeping their children's world intact, even when it seemed impossible. Protect them, he had said. Feed them, shield them, guide them, even if the world turns its back. She had nodded, tears blurring the edges of her vision, carrying his last wish into a life of hardship that now brought her to this very kitchen. Alexander leaned against the doorframe, trying to make sense of the scene. He had amassed wealth beyond imagination, filling his mansion with luxury and security. Yet here was a woman whose every small movement carried the weight of responsibility, love, and sacrifice. Something inside him shifted, a mixture of shock, curiosity, and a pang of guilt. He had never stopped to consider the lives of those who served him, the hidden struggles behind polite smiles and silent footsteps. Amara reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded photograph, carefully slipping it alongside the food. The picture depicted a young girl, radiant and smiling beside a man Alexander recognized, her father. A jolt ran through him. That simple, folded image, hidden in a bag of leftovers, was the first thread of a story he had never known, a story that had been quietly unraveling in his own home. He watched as she moved to leave, carefully wiping her hands on her apron, straightening her posture, masking every trace of the clandestine act. Alexander's mind raced. Who was she protecting? What had she hidden in this quiet, midnight ritual? And why did the photograph make his heart stop? Not because of wealth lost or gained, but because of a life lived in unseen struggle, courage, and devotion. The clock ticked on. Shadows stretched across the kitchen. The silver light from the moon caught the edges of the counters, and Alexander realized that this was not about food at all. It was about survival, legacy, and secrets carried across generations. Something in Amara's movements, in the careful placement of each item, in the reverent handling of the photograph, hinted at a deeper truth, one that could upend everything he believed about his household, and perhaps even himself. The morning light streamed through the mansion's tall windows, spilling across polished floors that had never felt colder. Alexander Moore, despite the day's obligations, could not shake the image of Amara in the kitchen. The careful way she had hidden the food, the reverence with which she had handled the photograph, each motion etched into his memory like a riddle he was desperate to solve. He wandered back into the kitchen, pretending casual curiosity, scanning the counters. That's when he noticed a small envelope tucked beneath the edge of the marble countertop. His fingers hesitated before lifting it. The handwriting was precise, neat, and distinctly hers. To the keeper of the home. Alexander unfolded the letter. The words struck him like a sudden gust of wind. She wrote of survival, of nights spent quietly rationing meals not for herself, but for children in the neighborhood who had no one to care for them. She explained the satchel, the hidden food, the deliberate silence. Everything was an act of protection, of compassion, a shield for the vulnerable. Flashback. Years ago, Alexander remembered the brief comment of a neighbor, praising the black maid's kindness to a sick child. He had nodded politely, barely registering the words, absorbed in his own wealth and ambitions. At that time, he could not have imagined the depth of her sacrifice. She had taken in scraps, planned every movement, and risked reprimand to ensure others would eat. The letter continued, revealing that she had done this quietly, refusing any recognition or assistance. Alexander felt a pang of guilt that had nothing to do with wealth. He realized he had been blind for years, insulated in his mansion, unaware of the silent courage of those who labored within his walls. Amara's words also hinted at something else, a small, hidden responsibility that extended beyond the neighborhood children. She had mentioned an heirloom, an object kept safe for her daughter, something that had been taken long ago from her family. She never revealed the full story, only that it was sacred, and its retrieval was a mission of justice she carried quietly while keeping her family afloat. Alexander's mind raced. Each word planted a seed of curiosity and unease. Who was her daughter? And what was the significance of this heirloom? Why had he never noticed, never asked, never seen? The mansion, with all its luxury, had shielded him from the struggles that quietly defined the lives of those he employed. He stared at the marble counter for a long moment, the letter heavy in his hands. This was more than food. It was history, survival, and unacknowledged courage. Alexander felt the first stirrings of empathy he had not allowed himself in years. The invisible threads of Amara's life were stretching across the mansion, connecting to a story he had never imagined, one that might forever alter the hierarchy he had so carefully maintained. Micro cliffhanger, what was the heirloom? And how far would Amara go to protect it while keeping her family safe under his roof? That evening, Alexander found himself wandering toward the outskirts of the mansion grounds, drawn by a curiosity he could no longer resist. The sprawling estate, usually a symbol of control and wealth, now felt like a cage, a place where unseen lives quietly endured, sacrificed, and persevered under his oblivious gaze. Amara's small apartment, tucked behind the main house, was modest, almost fragile compared to the opulence just steps away. As Alexander approached, he could see through the window a young woman, poised yet gentle, carefully sorting papers and small objects on a wooden table. Her movements were deliberate, almost reverent, and the sunlight streaming through the window highlighted her features. This was Amara's daughter, Naomi, 22 years old, carrying the legacy of her mother's struggles and resilience. Flashback. Naomi's childhood had been painted in shades of survival and quiet courage. She had watched her mother labor endlessly, managing the household, stretching every meal, and ensuring that the children's needs were met before her own. Even as a girl, Naomi had understood responsibility in its most demanding form. She had learned to read the subtleties in her mother's eyes, to anticipate danger, and to protect the fragments of their dignity from a world that had taken much from them. Now, as a young adult, Naomi bore the weight of those lessons with grace. She was working on an object, small, ornate, and unmistakably important. Alexander's eyes narrowed as he realized it was the heirloom Amara had referenced in her letter. A delicate golden locket, engraved with initials and an emblem that seemed eerily familiar, lay open before her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced its contours, the intensity of her concentration revealing its priceless significance. Alexander's mind raced. The food in the kitchen, the hidden letter, the careful handling of the heirloom. They were threads in a tapestry of survival, courage, and justice that had been woven for decades. Naomi's life, her sacrifices, and her quiet determination were the visible manifestation of her mother's unseen labor. Flashback. Naomi remembered a day when her mother whispered stories of her grandmother, who had kept the family's lineage and property secret from opportunists and deceitful relatives. One day, Amara had said, "You will understand why we must protect what is ours, even if the world does not see." Naomi had promised herself she would honor that legacy, balancing survival with dignity, ensuring that the family's story would not be lost. Alexander's heart pounded as he observed her. He had never anticipated this. His assumptions, his wealth, and his indifference all had blinded him to the extraordinary courage unfolding quietly beside him for years. Naomi was not merely his maid's daughter. She was the keeper of a generational secret, a guardian of history, and a young woman balancing the weight of survival with an unwavering moral compass. He stepped back, barely making a sound, and realized that this moment, this act of quiet devotion, was far more powerful than any display of wealth or authority he had ever orchestrated. Every glance, every gesture, every careful decision Naomi made connected to a lineage of strength and resilience he had never truly seen. Micro cliffhanger. How did Naomi come into possession of the heirloom? And what connection did it have to Alexander's own estate? The answers were hidden in history, waiting for discovery. As the days passed, Alexander's curiosity evolved into a quiet determination. He couldn't shake the image of Naomi and the heirloom. Each time he saw her, he was reminded of the legacy that seemed intertwined with his own wealth and property. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt like a puzzle, one that required pieces he had never considered. One afternoon, Alexander decided to delve deeper. He arranged a meeting with the estate's old archivist, a man who had served the Moore family for decades. The archivist's dusty office was filled with records, maps, and historical documents, each piece a fragment of the mansion's past. As Alexander explained his concerns, the archivist listened intently, pulling out old deeds and family records. Flashback, decades earlier, the estate had been part of a larger land grant, originally owned by Naomi's ancestors. The records revealed that Amara's grandmother had once held title to the land, a legacy that had been lost through deceit and legal manipulation. The heirloom, a golden locket, was a symbol of that lost heritage, passed down through generations as a reminder of the family's rightful ownership. The archivist laid out the documents, and Alexander's eyes widened as he saw the familiar names and signatures. Naomi's lineage was intricately connected to the estate's history, a connection that had been obscured by time and circumstance. The locket, now in Naomi's hands, was not just a family treasure. It was a key to reclaiming a legacy that had been taken from them. Alexander felt a mix of awe and responsibility. He realized that Naomi and her family were the rightful heirs to a portion of the land he had assumed was solely his. This revelation shifted his perspective on wealth and power. The mansion was more than a symbol of his success. It was a testament to the resilience and heritage of Naomi's family. As Alexander processed this new understanding, he decided to approach Naomi with honesty and respect. He wanted to offer her the opportunity to reclaim what was rightfully hers, to honor the legacy that had been hidden for so long. He also recognized that this was not just about property or wealth. It was about justice, respect, and the recognition of a family's rightful place in history. Flashback. Naomi's grandmother had once fought tirelessly to protect their land, but was ultimately defeated by powerful interests. The heirloom, the golden locket, had been the symbol of their struggle and resilience. Naomi's mother, Amara, had preserved the family's dignity and hope, ensuring that the legacy would not be forgotten. Alexander's heart weighed heavy with the responsibility he now felt. He understood that his wealth and power could be a force for good, a means to restore what had been lost and to support a family that had endured so much. He resolved to act with integrity, to ensure that Naomi and her family would have the opportunity to rebuild and thrive. Micro cliffhanger. As Alexander prepared to speak with Naomi, he wondered how she would respond. Would she accept the offer to reclaim her heritage, or would the wounds of the past run too deep? The next chapter of their story was about to unfold. The sun dipped low over the mansion's horizon, casting long shadows across the estate. Alexander Moore, now deeply aware of Naomi's legacy, felt a newfound sense of responsibility. He arranged a meeting with her in the estate's garden, a serene space where the past and present seemed to blend seamlessly. Naomi arrived, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. She had sensed Alexander's shift, the subtle change in his demeanor, and wondered what this meeting might bring. As they sat on a bench, surrounded by blooming flowers, Alexander began to share the discoveries he had uncovered: documents, old maps, and the family's connection to the estate. Flashback. Naomi's grandmother had once walked these very grounds, nurturing dreams of a future where her family's legacy would be restored. The heirloom, the golden locket, was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of resilience and hope, passed down through generations. Amara had spoken of these stories in hushed tones, instilling in Naomi a deep sense of duty and pride. As Alexander spoke, Naomi listened intently. The revelation that her family was the original owner of a significant portion of the estate was both exhilarating and overwhelming. She felt a surge of emotion, pride in her heritage, but also the weight of the responsibility that came with it. Alexander offered Naomi a choice: to reclaim the land and honor her family's legacy, or to continue their lives as they were. He made it clear that his intention was not to overshadow her, but to support and empower her. The mansion, he explained, could be a place of reconciliation and justice, where both families could flourish together. Flashback. Naomi remembered her mother's struggles, the nights spent gathering scraps, and the quiet sacrifices that defined their lives. The idea of reclaiming what was rightfully theirs was both a dream and a daunting task. She understood that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, from legal battles to societal perceptions. Naomi's eyes met Alexander's, and in that moment, she saw sincerity and a willingness to right past wrongs. She realized that this was not just about land or wealth. It was about restoring dignity, honoring her ancestors, and creating a future where her family could thrive. As they spoke, the conversation shifted from the past to the future. They discussed strategies for reclaiming the land, the legal steps needed, and how they could collaborate to rebuild trust and community. Alexander assured Naomi that he would use his resources and influence to support her, but the journey would be hers to lead. Micro cliffhanger. With a renewed sense of purpose, Naomi and Alexander set out on a path of reconciliation. But as they prepared for the challenges ahead, they both knew that the road to justice would test their resolve and their bond. Would they succeed in restoring the family's legacy, or would the obstacles prove too great? Weeks turned into months, and Naomi and Alexander embarked on the challenging journey of reclaiming the family's legacy. The path was fraught with legal battles, societal skepticism, and the complexity of navigating both their shared history and the present. Yet, each step they took brought them closer to justice and reconciliation. The courtroom became a battleground where history and modernity clashed. Naomi, supported by Alexander's resources and her own unwavering resolve, presented the documents and the heirloom that symbolized her family's rightful claim. The legal proceedings were arduous, and the opposition, composed of powerful interests, was determined to resist the restitution of the land. Flashback. Naomi's grandmother had faced similar battles at her time. She had fought not just for property, but for recognition and dignity. Naomi drew strength from those stories, understanding that this was more than a legal struggle. It was a fight for identity and legacy. As the case progressed, Alexander and Naomi worked tirelessly, building alliances, gathering evidence, and ensuring that the truth could not be denied. They faced setbacks, moments of doubt, and the weight of the past pressing heavily on their shoulders. But with each challenge, their bond grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect and a shared vision of justice. In one pivotal moment, as the courtroom awaited the judge's decision, Naomi held the heirloom close, a symbol of resilience and hope. Alexander stood by her side, his presence a silent testament to the transformation they had both undergone. The judge's ruling, when it came, was a victory not just for Naomi, but for the legacy of her family and the integrity of justice. Flashback. Amara, Naomi's mother, had always believed that justice would prevail, even in the darkest times. Her faith in the future had been unwavering, and now, as Naomi stood victorious, that faith was vindicated. The restoration of the land marked not just the reclaiming of property, but the healing of wounds that had been inflicted over generations. Naomi and Alexander worked together to ensure that the estate became a place of community, where the past and present coexisted harmoniously. They initiated educational programs, community projects, and fostered an environment where dignity and respect were paramount. As the mansion's doors opened to a new chapter, the estate transformed into a symbol of reconciliation and justice. Naomi's family, once marginalized, now stood proudly as rightful heirs, their legacy honored and preserved. Alexander, too, had grown through this journey, understanding that true wealth lay in empathy, justice, and the restoration of dignity. In the quiet moments of reflection, Naomi and Alexander realized that their journey had been about more than land and property. It had been about reclaiming identity, acknowledging the past, and forging a future that honored the strength and resilience of those who came before them. Final emotional payoff. The mansion, once a symbol of disparity, now resonated with harmony and justice. Naomi and Alexander, having navigated the complexities of legacy and reconciliation, stood as partners in a new dawn, where the past was respected and the future was built on mutual respect and shared values.